"You don't belong here," my father said into his champagne glass. He didn't shout it. He didn't need to. The music was still playing. The caterer was slicing cake. 42 guests stood in the backyard of the house I grew up in, holding paper plates with gold trim that said Happy 38th, Caroline. And my father looked straight at me and said it again louder. "You don't belong in this house." That was 3 months ago. September. My birthday. The oak tree in the yard still had its leaves then. What most of them didn't know, what my stepmother had spent 6 years quietly arranging, was sitting inside a thin navy folder in my childhood bedroom closet, 12 feet from where I was standing. The original deed.
Signed.
Notarized.
Filed.
Before I go further, if this story resonates with you, take a second to like and subscribe. And if you're listening tonight, drop your city and time in the comments. I always wonder who's awake with me when these memories come back. Now let me take you back 21 years. To the week my mother died. I was 17 when we buried her. Brain aneurysm. Sudden. No warning. She collapsed in the kitchen while I was finishing homework at the table. My father was out of town on a sales trip. I remember the ambulance lights reflecting off the refrigerator. I remember the sound my father made when he walked into the hospital room and saw her. After the funeral, the house felt too large, too quiet. My father moved through it like a man searching for something he couldn't name.
For a while, it was just us.
Dinners at the kitchen island. Frozen lasagna. Silence. 3 months later, he started staying late at work. 6 months later, he brought her home. "This is Marlene," he said, too casually. "She helps with accounting at the firm." Marlene had perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect sympathy. She hugged me too long at the door. "I've heard so much about you," she said, like I was a story she'd already finished reading. She had a son,
Ethan.
14. He looked at me once, nodded, and went straight to the fridge like he'd been there before. Within 4 weeks, Marlene was sleeping over. Within 3 months, she had a drawer in the bathroom. Within 5, her framed photos were on the mantel. My mother's were moved upstairs. "I just thought it was time for a refresh," Marlene said one Saturday morning while wrapping my mother's wedding portrait in tissue paper. My father stood beside her and said nothing. That was the first time I understood silence could be an answer. By Christmas, Ethan had taken over the den for his study space. By spring, my mother's rose bushes were replaced with hydrangeas. "She liked roses," I said once. Marlene smiled without looking at me. They were difficult to maintain. The following year, I left for college. State school. Scholarships.
Loans.
2 part-time jobs. My father attended move-in day, but left before we finished unpacking. Marlene had a migraine. Ethan stayed home because he had a soccer tournament. My father hugged me once in the parking lot. "Call if you need anything," he said. I did.
Twice.
Both times, Marlene answered. "He's in a meeting. He's exhausted. He'll call you back." He didn't. After graduation, I moved to Chicago. Marketing firm. Entry level. Small apartment. Second-hand couch. I sent birthday cards. Christmas gifts. Mother's Day flowers to the house. Marlene always posted photos online. Family dinner. Proud of my boys. Sometimes I wasn't tagged. Sometimes I wasn't in the photo. At 29, I came home for Thanksgiving and realized my bedroom had been turned into a guest room. Neutral bedding. No trace of me except a faint outline on the wall where my corkboard used to hang. "We thought you wouldn't mind," Marlene said lightly. "You're hardly here." My father stood in the hallway holding a ladder.
He didn't look at me.
That same year, Ethan moved back after college. The den became his office. He started referring to the house as home base. My father liked that. He laughed more around Ethan. Talked about legacy and keeping things in the family. I didn't understand the shift at first. Not fully. But I felt it. Small comments. "You've built such an independent life. You don't really need us anymore. You're doing your own thing." They said it like praise. It didn't feel like praise. When I was 34, Marlene suggested we celebrate my birthday properly at the house. Big backyard gathering. Extended family. Neighbors. My father's colleagues. I was surprised. Flattered, even. For a moment, I thought maybe something had changed. Maybe grief had softened into memory. Maybe my father had found his way back to me. I should have trusted the knot in my stomach instead. 2 weeks before the party, my Aunt Denise called. "Sweetheart," she said carefully, "has your father talked to you about the house?" "What about it?" There was a pause. "Never mind. Maybe I misunderstood." But she hadn't misunderstood. 3 days before my birthday, I came home early to drop off wine for the party. Marlene's car was in the driveway. So was a silver SUV I didn't recognize. I let myself in quietly. Voices floated from the kitchen. "The cleanest way to handle it is to clarify residency," a man was saying. Legal tone.
Crisp.
"If she doesn't live here full-time, it strengthens the primary beneficiary claim." My heart began to pound. Marlene answered. "She hasn't lived here in years." "And the deed?" the man asked. My father cleared his throat. "We'll update it after the party." The party. I stood in the hallway, invisible. I didn't walk in. I didn't confront them. I walked upstairs instead, to what used to be my bedroom. The closet still had the original wooden shelf my mother had installed. Behind a stack of old yearbooks, there was a slim navy folder. I don't know what made me look there. Maybe instinct. Maybe memory. Inside was a copy of the original deed, dated 1998. Both my parents' names, joint ownership, and handwritten in the margin, in my mother's looping script. "If anything happens to me, Caroline stays protected." Below it, a note clipped to the page. "Filed copy with Anderson and Cole. Do not remove without legal review." I stared at that line for a long time. Downstairs, I could hear Marlene laughing. My father laughing with her. I slid the folder back into place, closed the closet, and went downstairs with a neutral smile. 3 days later, 42 guests stood in the backyard. There were balloons tied to the oak tree. A slideshow playing on a rented screen. Photos of Ethan. Photos of my father.
2 of me.
From high school. Marlene tapped her glass for attention. "My beautiful stepdaughter is 38, she said warmly. Polite applause. My father took the microphone next. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking a lot about family," he began. And that's when he said it. "You don't belong here." The music stopped. Someone dropped a fork. My cousin whispered, "What is happening?" Marlene already had a tissue in her hand. I didn't notice that detail until later. What I noticed was the way my father wouldn't look at me after he said it. Like the words were a package he had already mailed. And now he couldn't take them back. I stood there for 5 seconds. Maybe 10. Long enough for the silence to harden. Then I felt it. The memory of that navy folder. 12 feet away. Upstairs. Waiting. The room didn't go quiet all at once. It unraveled. Forks paused midair. My aunt blinked like she hadn't heard him correctly. My cousin let out a nervous laugh that died halfway through. And my father? He stood there at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, like he had just said something clever. "You don't belong here." On my birthday. In the house I grew up in. The house my mother painted every spring. The house I helped repair after the storm when I was 16. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. That old ache, the one that had lived there since Mom died. But this time, something was different. Because this time, I wasn't powerless. I reached into my bag, slowly. Calmly. "Dad," I said quietly, "are you sure?" He smirked. "Don't make a scene." A scene. Like I hadn't just been erased in front of 30 people. I placed the envelope on the table. Cream-colored. Legal-sized. Sealed. My father's smile faltered. My stepmother leaned forward. "What is that?" I didn't answer her. I slid the document out and unfolded it carefully, letting the paper flatten against the polished oak table. "It's the deed," I said. Silence. My father frowned. "What deed?" "The house." You could almost hear the oxygen leave the room. My cousin whispered, "Wait, what?" My father laughed, too loudly, too quickly. "Don't be ridiculous. I've owned this house for 30 years. "No," I said, meeting his eyes for the first time that night. "You haven't." I turned the document toward him. His name wasn't on it. Mine was. My full legal name. Transferred 6 months before my mother passed.
Signed.
Notarized.
Filed.
His hand trembled as he reached for the paper. "This isn't real," he muttered. "It is," I replied. "Mom didn't want the house to be sold. She knew you were planning to." The stepmother's face drained of color. "She left it to me," I continued, my voice steady. "With one condition." My father's jaw tightened. "What condition?" "That I decide who belongs here." The weight of that sentence settled over the entire room. My father looked around at his guests, his wife, the neighbors he had invited to show off. For the first time in my life, he looked small. "You manipulated her," he snapped. I shook my head. "She was sick, not stupid." He tried to gather himself, straightening his jacket. "Even if this were true, you wouldn't dare." Wouldn't I? For years, I had swallowed every insult, every dismissal, every "you're too sensitive" and "stop being dramatic." But tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. "I didn't come here to embarrass you," I said softly. "You did that yourself." My aunt finally spoke. "Is this illegal?" "Yes," I said. "Fully." I watched realization spread across my father's face, slow and terrifying. He wasn't in control anymore. And he knew it. "You're trying to take my home," he whispered. I tilted my head slightly. "No," I said. "I'm deciding who belongs in mine." My words didn't echo. They landed. Heavy. Final. "I'm deciding who belongs in mine." For a moment, no one moved. Then my father laughed.
Not amused.
Threatened. "This is absurd," he said, turning to the guests as if they were a jury. "She's emotional. She's always been emotional." There it was. The old narrative. The unstable daughter. The dramatic one. The one who didn't fit. But this time I didn't flinch. "I'm not asking you to leave tonight," I said calmly. "I'm asking you to understand something." His jaw flexed. "Understand what?" "That you don't get to humiliate me in my own house." The word "own" seemed to hit him physically. My stepmother stood abruptly. "This is harassment. You can't just show up with papers and threaten people." "I didn't threaten anyone," I replied.
He did.
A murmur rippled across the table. My aunt cleared her throat. "Richard, did you know about this?"
"I told you," he snapped.
"It's fake. It's recorded with the county," I said evenly. "You can verify it tomorrow." His confidence cracked just slightly. "And everyone saw it." He grabbed the deed again, scanning it as if he might find a hidden flaw. "This was 6 months before your mother died," he said quietly. "Yes. She was sick. She was careful." Silence. I could see it now, the memory forming behind his eyes. The nights Mom asked him to leave the room. The lawyer visits. The arguments he thought I didn't hear. "She wouldn't do that to me," he muttered. "She did it for the house," I corrected. "Not against you." That was the part he couldn't accept. This wasn't revenge from her. It was protection for me. And that hurt him more. My cousin shifted uncomfortably. "Uncle Richard, were you going to sell it?" His head snapped up. "That's none of your business." Which was answer enough. I took a slow breath. "You told me last year that memories don't pay property taxes," I said. "Remember?" His silence confirmed it. "You were going to list it this spring." He looked cornered now. Exposed. And pride does strange things when it has nowhere left to hide. "You think owning paper makes you powerful?" he said, his voice low and sharp. "You don't know the first thing about responsibility. I've been paying the property taxes for 8 months. That one landed like a gunshot. My stepmother's head whipped toward him. "What?" He stared at me. "You what?" "Mom set up a trust account. I gained access when I turned 25. Another detail he hadn't known. Another layer he wasn't prepared for. "I didn't tell you," I continued, "because I didn't want this." I looked around the room, at the decorations, the cake, the banner that said "Happy Birthday" in gold letters. I wanted one night where I didn't feel like an outsider. And there it was. The truth. Not anger. Not revenge. Just exhaustion. My father's shoulders dropped, not in defeat. In realization. You've been planning this, he said quietly.
No, iyan suet.
You forced it. The room felt smaller now. Like everyone was witnessing something private that should have stayed between father and daughter. But he made it public. So public it became. What are you going to do? He asked finally. It wasn't defiant anymore. It was almost fearful. And for the first time in my life, I saw something unfamiliar in him. Uncertainty. I folded the deed slowly and slid it back into the envelope. I'm not throwing you out tonight. Relief flickered across his face. But this house isn't going on the market. The relief vanished. And starting tomorrow, I continued, if you want to live here, we talk. Honestly. No more pretending I don't exist unless I'm convenient. My stepmother scoffed. This is blackmail. No, I said quietly. This is boundaries. My father stared at me for a long time. The guests were frozen, waiting to see if he would explode. Or bend. He looked around at the faces watching him. His pride, his image, his authority, all hanging by a thread. And then he did something no one expected.
He sat down. Slowly.
The chair creaked beneath him. He set the deed back on the table. And for the first time since my mother died, he didn't argue. He didn't insult me. He didn't dismiss me. He just said one sentence. You should have told me. And that's when I realized something devastating. He wasn't angry because he lost control. He was angry because she hadn't trusted him. And maybe neither had I. The cake candles were still lit. Wax melting down the sides. No one sang. No one clapped. But something shifted that night. Not power. Not revenge. Something heavier.
Truth.
And truth, once spoken, doesn't go back in the envelope. The guests left quietly.
No dramatic exits. No whispered goodbyes.
Just coats lifted from chairs and eyes that avoided mine. The banner sagged slightly over the doorway. Happy birthday looked almost ironic now. By the time the front door clicked shut for the last time, the house felt different.
Still. Heavier.
My father remained seated at the table long after everyone was gone. The cake sat untouched between us. The candles had burned themselves out. I didn't know, he said finally. It wasn't offensive. It wasn't sharp. It sounded smaller. I know, I replied. My stepmother lingered in the hallway, arms crossed, watching like this was a negotiation she didn't trust. After a tense moment, she muttered something about getting some air and stepped outside. For the first time that night, it was just us. Father and daughter. Not audience and spectacle. He rubbed his face slowly. She met with the lawyer alone? Yes. When? The weeks you were traveling. He gave a dry, almost humorless laugh. Business trips. We both knew some of them weren't business. She thought you were going to sell, I said gently. She heard you on the phone. He stared at the table. I was scared, he admitted. After the diagnosis, I didn't know how I was going to cover everything. That wasn't the man I remembered. The man I remembered barked orders and dismissed feelings. This one looked tired.
Human.
She left something else, I said quietly. His eyes lifted. What? I reached back into my bag. There was a second envelope. Older. Slightly worn at the edges. His name written in my mother's handwriting. He froze when he saw it. She asked me to give it to you if this ever became necessary. His hand hesitated before taking it. For a second, I saw fear. Not of me. Of what she might have written. He opened it carefully. The paper inside was thin, folded twice. He read silently. I watched his face change. Not dramatically.
Subtly. His jaw tightened.
Then loosened. His breathing shifted. And then his eyes filled. I had never seen my father cry. Not at her funeral. Not when the doctors said terminal. Not when I packed up her clothes. But now a tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away immediately. What did she say? He asked hoarsely. She told you. I replied softly. He swallowed hard. She said I would try to sell because I don't know how to sit with loss. That sounded like her.
Honest. Direct.
Unapologetic. He let out a shaky breath. She said the house isn't wood and brick. It's the only place our daughter feels safe. Our daughter. He hadn't called me that in years. She said if I pushed you away, he continued quietly, I'd lose more than the house. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was grieving. For her. For the years after her. For everything neither of us handled well. I thought you blamed me, he said suddenly. For what? For surviving. The words stunned me. I thought you looked at me and saw the man who didn't save her. My chest tightened. I was 18, I whispered. I didn't know how to look at you at all. The truth sat between us.
Raw.
Unpolished.
Real.
He folded the letter slowly, carefully, like it might break. I shouldn't have said what I said tonight.
No excuses. No qualifiers.
Just acknowledgement. You humiliated me, I said quietly. I know, and you've done it before. He nodded. Another silence. But this one felt different. Not a wall. A bridge under construction. I don't want you gone, he said finally. I just didn't know how to live in a house that reminded me of everything I failed at. You didn't fail, I said. We lost her. His voice cracked on the word lost. For years, we had turned grief into distance. Tonight, it turned into honesty. I picked up the knife beside the cake. Cut 2 slices. Placed one in front of him. 30 isn't how I thought this birthday would go, I said softly. A faint, broken smile touched his face. No, he agreed. It isn't. He looked around the house slowly. The walls. The staircase. The framed photos she insisted on hanging. Your mother always said this place would outlive our pride, he murmured. I almost laughed. That sounds like her. He took a breath. So, he said carefully, what happens now? I met his eyes. Now we stop pretending. He nodded slowly. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting for space in this house. I owned it. But more importantly, I belonged. Not because of paper. Not because of power. But because I finally stopped accepting a version of myself that someone else defined. The deed stayed in my bag that night. But the letter?
He kept that.
And sometimes, the thing that changes everything isn't ownership. It's the truth you are finally brave enough to open.